welcome to a very special episode of the Cozy Cottage Crochet Podcast. My name is Hannah, and this is a podcast channel all about crochet, a little bit of knitting and sewing, and generally living the yarniest life possible in St. Petersburg, Florida, where I live. How are you? This is a special episode because if you are watching this on Saturday, October 6th, I am not in the United States currently. I am actually on a plane right now as you are watching this, flying from the UK back to Florida. So I am not able to record a regular podcast. So what I have done is pre-record a special episode all about questions and answers, questions that you guys have asked me and answers that I can give you. So before we jump in, I just want to say if you're looking for me anywhere on the interwebs, you can find me as the Cozy Cottage Crochet on Instagram and Facebook. There's links down below in the drop down, and you can absolutely follow me there. I do post a few times a week usually. Also on Ravelry, I am the Cozy Cottage. We do have a Cozy Cottage Crochet podcast Ravelry group. There's a link for that down below. And we have some awesome crochet alongs going on, namely the Nerd Along. So check out all of the details. That is going on until Thanksgiving. There's going to be some awesome prizes, which I should have showed off in the last episode, and there's going to be some more coming in. So definitely go check that out in the Ravelry thread, read all of the rules, and submit your things. There are so many things in the chatter thread and a few things in the finished object thread already, and they're just amazing. So let's jump right in, shall we? I want to talk about a topic that I'm not going to say that a specific person has asked me this question, because probably like 100 people have asked me this question since I started the podcast, and I have wanted to talk about it for a little while. It just seems that every time I sit down to record a regular episode, there's not enough time. And this topic is how to block projects made out of acrylic. So let's talk about how to block projects in general first, and then I will talk about acrylic specifically. So different yarn requires a different blocking technique. You can't treat all yarn the same because it's not. So if I have, for example, a project made out of 100% merino wool, this is my Mirage hat cowl made out of 100% superwash merino in Sheep Happens yarn. So if I want to block this, I am not going to block this in the same way that I would block an acrylic project because it just won't work the same. So if I want to block something made out of wool or a wool blend, specifically a superwash or even a non-superwash, you just need to be careful about the temperature of the water. What I'm going to do is soak this or steam block it. So I generally prefer soaking my projects because I tend to drag them all over the place and they really need a good wash by the time I'm done with them. So I put a little bit of wool wash. I have a little container of Euclin. You can use soak. You could even use Woolite if you're in America. I don't know if they have that in other places, but basically any kind of really gentle wool wash that is made for natural fibers. Put a little bit of it in a bowl with some lukewarm water, not hot, especially if you are using non-superwash wool. You need to make sure that it's not hot so that your project does not felt. And then you just kind of put the project in. If you're blocking anything with pom-poms, make sure that you block it prior to adding pom-poms because the pom-poms will not like that very much. I just stick it in the bowl and I squish it around a little bit and then I leave it to soak for a while. Then I squeeze the water out gently. You do not want to wring your wool projects. That will really stretch out the stitches. It'll make it look very strange. Please don't wring your wool projects. Then all I do is roll it up in a towel, press more of the water out, and then lay it flat to dry. And if I want to pin it out, then I will on my blocking mats. But like for a project like this, I wouldn't want to pin this out because I don't want it to get any bigger. But if you're pinning out a shawl or something that you really want to open up the lace, you may want to pin it out at certain points to stretch out the wool. And once it dries, it'll stay like that until it gets wet again. Now, if you are blocking, and that goes for wool, alpaca, any kind of natural fiber like that, mohair, you want to make sure that you're soaking it in a lukewarm water, gently squeezing the water through, squeezing the soap through. Don't agitate it violently. Don't wring it out. Just squeeze the water out gently, roll it in a towel, and then pin it out to dry. For cotton, I also tend to wet block my cotton if it's 100% cotton. The only thing is you want to make sure that you don't hang it because cotton is a very heavy yarn. And this would probably go for bamboo too. I've never tried to hang bamboo yarn, but if you hang something made of cotton yarn, like from the top, it's going to be so heavy that it's going to pull it out of shape and it's not going to go back into its shape. Cotton does not have any elasticity. So I highly recommend that you lay your cotton projects flat to block them. Now on to the question of the day, acrylic. So the first thing you will need if you are blocking an acrylic project, now remember acrylic is basically plastic. So you have to be careful when you're blocking acrylic. It's very hardy, meaning that it can go through the washer, it can go through the dryer, it can take a lot of abuse, but one thing it cannot take is super high heat. So the first thing you will need is some blocking mats. Now, I know some people spend a lot of money on their blocking mats. I got these kids foam mats that you like put down on the floor of like a playroom. I think like 10 of them for $8 on Amazon. And I got several packs of them, so I have a stack like this high. They just are puzzle pieces, they connect, and this is what I do my blocking on. I know some people have fancy blocking pins, etc. I have straight pins with a little ball on the end. That just makes it easier on my fingers when I'm pinning things out. I got these from Joann's. So these are $8. This was like maybe $2 for a container of straight pins. And I have more than one container of straight pins because eventually they will bend, especially if you're really aggressively blocking something. But they're so cheap. You could just replace them and throw them out. So you will need those. You will also need either a steamer or an iron with a steam setting. So when I am blocking acrylic, generally, I will pin the project out on my blocking mats flat to the size that I want. And you can really stretch acrylic, like to the point where you think it doesn't want to be stretched. It can go that far. It may be pulling your mats up at the corners because you've stretched it so far, but it can go that far if you wanted to. Pin it out flat, and then what you do is you turn your iron onto the steam setting, make sure there's water inside, and you steam it. Now, the thing to remember, there are two very important things to remember about blocking acrylic yarn. One, do not touch the iron to the yarn. If you touch the hot metal to the plastic yarn, you will melt it, okay? Please don't do that. You need to be hovering about 1 inch or 2 above your project so that the steam can saturate it, but that the metal part of the iron does not touch your project. This is a mistake I think a lot of people make, is they think that they can actually touch the iron to the yarn because they've done it with wool, they've done it maybe with a color work project and knitting for wool. You cannot do it with acrylic yarn. Even an acrylic blend, I wouldn't do it because there's plastic content in your yarn. It is not going to like it, it's going to melt. So that's tip number 1, don't touch the iron. Make sure you're hovering 1 to 2 inches above your project. And tip number 2 is once you have blocked it, meaning once you have steamed it and the fibers separate, you are not going to be able to get it back to what it was before. So if you're not sure how big you need to block something, block it gently first, because once it's called killing the acrylic, once you really steam it, it is not going to shrink back to the size. It will be that size forever until the apocalypse comes, okay? So it works really well. I steam block pretty much every single acrylic project that I have ever done, except for blankets, because that's just too much work. But you have to be careful. Now, the good thing about acrylic yarn is if you've made something slightly too small, you can really stretch it and steam it, and then it will stay, and it may fit you. But if you have made something and you don't know what size you want it to be exactly, and then you start blocking it and you overblock it, you overstretch it out, it will not get smaller. It will stay that size forever. And you can actually see, if you look closely, especially on like a lace pattern, if you have the project laid out flat, you pin it out and then you start steaming it, you can see the fibers like running away from the steam, like they expand. So that's why I said you can really, really aggressively block acrylic, even if it's like curling your mats up, because once you steam it, it will expand and settle down. So those are my tips. Also, acrylic yarn, sometimes you don't need to steam block it. If it's a baby blanket, if it's something that fits you already, you just throw it in the washer and the dryer. I mean, make sure that you look at the instructions on the ball band because some acrylics are nicer than others. But for example, all the blankets that I've made, all the cardigans that I've made out of acrylic yarn, I have thrown them in the washer. Now I wash most things on a cold setting, so I would wash it on cold or a warm setting. You don't want to boil the acrylic because it will melt, but you don't really need to be that afraid of a washing machine as long as you're not using hot water in your cycle. You can throw it in the washer, but what really makes it soften up and make it so cozy to wrap up in and so cozy to wear is when you put it in the dryer. So I usually dry on low heat, so not the timed 60-minute cycle on my dryer that I use for towels. Not that one. That heat I think would be too high. It's the low heat, like the everyday stuff that you throw in the dryer, like shirts, tops, undergarments, things like that. It can take that heat, and that heat and the agitation will soften it up so wonderfully. So if you have a stiff, scratchy acrylic project, now some yarn, especially older yarn from like 10, 20 years ago, you're not gonna get it to be that much softer. But I would say recently, acrylic yarn has come such a long way. I have made so many projects where I'm like, oh, it's stiff, I don't know, it doesn't have any drape, I don't like it. And then I put it in the dryer and everything is fabulous. So if you throw it in the washer and dryer and it still isn't quite as soft or quite as drapey as you would like it to be, then you can steam block it. If I'm gonna steam block and I know that I'm gonna steam block, I usually do that before I wash and dry it, but it doesn't really matter. It really doesn't. So those are my tips on how to block acrylic yarn. You just need mats, pins, and an iron. Just don't touch the iron to the fabric, okay? And please make sure you don't over block it if it already fits you, because it will not go back to the shape that it was in. And some things you need to be careful with. For example, if you are making a character hat and you want to block the hat, but it's got ears, block the hat, wash and dry the hat before you add the ears, because once you do that, it's going to really soften the acrylic and the ears are just going to be like, they're going to be so floppy. So sometimes you need stiffness in your project. So if you have a project that has these elements that you're sewing on, tying on, and you need to block or you need to wash, do that before you start sewing everything together so that it's not so soft that it has no structure. If you have further questions about how to block acrylic yarn, leave them down below and I will do my best to answer them on an upcoming video. But hopefully you found that helpful. I know so many people have asked me about that and I have been meaning to record a video or something on that for quite some time and I just haven't had a chance. So this is perfect timing. Now, for the rest of our time together, what I am going to do is answer some questions that people have asked in the Ravelry thread and a few questions that people have messaged me on Instagram or on Ravelry quite some time ago, because the last time I ordered a Q&A, I haven't ordered anything. The last time I made a Q&A video was months ago. I don't even know how long it was. It was quite some time. So I have several questions that have come in and I am going to do my best to answer them. So if you have asked me a question, keep your ears open because I may be answering your question right now. So you'll have to forgive me. I'm gonna look down because I wrote them out. So I'm gonna have to look down and read them. The first question is, Erica had asked, have you ever crocheted jewelry and do you enjoy wearing crochet jewelry? The simple answer to that is no. I have not ever crocheted any jewelry and I don't know if I would enjoy wearing crochet jewelry or not. I tend to not wear a ton of jewelry. I wear my wedding ring. I wear a spoon ring that someone gave this to me like years ago, literally years ago. I have no idea where they got it from. I've been looking for another one like it just in case this one breaks or I lose it or something for ages. And you can't really see because of the light, but it's basically like really decorative and all the ones I've seen are like kind of plain and I don't like them. And I wear earrings. That's it. I like never wear necklaces pretty much. I don't wear bracelets. I used to wear a watch, but then it stopped working, so I quit wearing a watch. I don't wear a ton of jewelry. I wouldn't be opposed to wearing crochet jewelry, as maybe in an earring form would be best for me, because I do tend to wear earrings every single day. I don't know that I don't think I would ever wear like a collar of crochet because I don't like things like choking me. I don't like things way up on my neck. So I haven't ever made any because there's so many things that I want to make instead. If you are interested in crochet jewelry, you should definitely check out Caroline of the Mind and Muse podcast. Hi, Caroline. She makes fabulous crochet jewelry and wears it constantly. So if that's something you're interested in, check out her podcast. She makes beautiful, beautiful crochet jewelry all the time. She felts it. It's like really amazing. So I don't know, maybe that'll change sometime in my life. Maybe I haven't met the crochet jewelry that I want to wear yet, but mostly I just wear earrings and my rings, and that's it. Lisa asked, what is my favorite thing I have ever crocheted? Oh man, that's a really good question. Because first of all, I have crocheted a lot of things. I would say that my favorite thing I have ever crocheted for myself is probably going to be, I think it's the Reminisce cardigan. It's the one I finished a few months ago out of Lion Brand Jeans yarn in the colorway Jumpsuit. It fits so well. It's so cozy. I love to wear it. I wear it all the time. I take it around with me, although I haven't worn it so much in the last month because it has been mind-blowingly hot. But as soon as it starts cooling down, I will be wearing that again. I love that project. And I know this is cheating because I'm going to list like a bunch of things. I don't think I have a single favorite project. I also really, really love my Hotel of Bees shawl. That shawl is incredible. It was such a fun make. I love to wear it. I need to get it out and wear it again. And the designer, who is a Spoonful of Yarn, came out with a new pattern just recently that's kind of similar in shape, but it's got tree designs on it. Oh my gosh, I need to make that. But my whip pile is overwhelming. So I am setting strict rules for myself until I get some things completed that I can't start extra projects. So that was one of my favorite to actually crochet. That was one of my favorite things I have ever made. And then the thing I would say that brings me the most happiness that I have crocheted was it was the first time I ever worked with fingering weight yarn, and I made a shawl called the Key West Coral Lace Shawl for my mom for Christmas. And I made it in a beautiful maroon color of wool-like. So the yarn cost was only like, I don't know, $6 or something, but it took me like 60 hours because I had never worked with fingering weight. It was a complicated lace pattern. I frogged so many rows of that pattern because I would be off by one stitch and I wanted it to be perfect. And it literally is just the best thing ever. Every time I think about that project, it makes me happy because I just spent so much time and I put so much love into it, and I would say that's probably my favorite thing I've ever crocheted. I don't have it to show you, of course, because it was a gift years ago, but it was a blast making it. I'm gonna go with that. That's my favorite thing. Lisa G asked, what has been the most surprising thing about being a pastor, and how can mental health professionals be most helpful to pastors? So if you don't know, if you're a newer viewer of this channel, what I do for my day job is I'm a pastor at a church in Tampa. I'm not like the head person. I'm just like a pastor on staff. So I handle all of the small groups and a lot of the volunteers and discipleship and classes and things like that. And let's see, that's what I do for my day job. My night job is I'm an adjunct professor. I do some online classes for theology, and then in between is when I crochet all the time, and I'm a crochet designer. I have some patterns on Ravelry. You can find a link for that below. So the question is, what is most surprising about being a pastor? I would say the one thing that really surprised me is the first time someone asked me, like, can I talk to you? And I knew they were like asking for counseling, and I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna tell this person. Like, I don't think I'm gonna be really helpful. And then so this person showed up, and I swear I said like 20 words the whole time. Like, we talked for several hours, and at the end that person was like, oh my gosh, that was so helpful, thank you. And I was like, literally, I didn't say anything to you. Like, I don't think I said anything. certainly nothing wise or like gave you any advice. And that was the most surprising thing to me, is that mostly when people want to talk and like counseling and things like that, now I'm not a professional therapist, so if someone has an issue beyond the scope of just talking, we have a place that we refer them to, where there's licensed psychiatrists, licensed psychologists, etc. However, if someone just wants to come in and like unload, that's not scary at all to me anymore, because I don't really have to say anything. That was the most surprising thing to me. How can mental health professionals be most helpful? I would say just by being there and being available. So mental health is something that if you haven't grown up in the church, or you're not like in a religious circle, this may not make any sense to you. But basically, for a long time, especially in the circles that I grew up in the kind of religious places that I've been to, mental health is stigmatized greatly. So like, I remember hearing things when I was younger, like, well, if you're really depressed, then you don't have enough faith, or you have a demon and we need to pray. Now, okay, sometimes, sure, but I would say as a general rule, that is a really, really harmful stigma. And for me personally, looking back, because anxiety is something that I deal with, I can see as a teenager that that's exactly what I was dealing with. I was depressed for some time, I had anxiety, and I did not know what was happening, and I just felt overwhelmed, and I felt anxious, and what I would do is go to sleep. I would take naps all the time. I love naps. Who doesn't love a good nap? But I would literally go to sleep so I didn't have to experience how crazy I felt like I was being, because I didn't have a name for it. I didn't know what it was called. I couldn't handle it, and no one... And this isn't a fault of anyone in my life at the time. It's just something that wasn't talked about. Nobody knew that this was even a thing. So if I had known back then what it was, I could have developed coping mechanisms. I could have done many more healthy things than going to sleep all of the time. And maybe I wouldn't have to be learning all of this stuff right now. So in churches especially, I think it is really, really harmful to say anything like that, because mental health is really, really important. And lots of people struggle with anxiety, with depression, with all of that. And it's not something to be ashamed of. If I was like, oh, I have strep throat and I'm just not going to take any medicine for it, you guys would be like, that's insane. That's insane. Literally, you should go get medicine. Well, yeah, because I have an actual thing that's wrong, and medicine will help get rid of it. So when you have depression, when you have anxiety, there is something wrong, okay? And it is not shameful to have to take medication. It is not shameful to need to talk to someone. It is a normal process, and it's completely fine. It should be celebrated. Like when someone takes a step and says, this is something I'm dealing with, I want to see if I can cope with this. I'm going to talk to someone. I'm going to try my best to develop mechanisms, change my life so that I don't have to be so stressed out about this thing. That should be celebrated. That should be amazing. That should be like a wonderful thing that someone's doing. Not like, oh, you're taking medication for that? First of all, that is rude. You would never tell someone who has like cancer or diabetes, like, you're taking medication for that? Okay, that's insane. No one would ever say that to someone with a disease. And you have to understand, mental health issues are actual diseases. It's not, people aren't just making it up. Now, are some people worse off than others? Yes. Some people don't need medication. Some people maybe need medication but have found other ways to deal with the issue and so are not taking any at the time. Some people's issues aren't big enough for them to need medication, but some people do, and that's fine. If it's a chemical imbalance, you should get it fixed. You can have a better life. You don't need to feel guilty about making your life better through medicine. I think that it's a wonderful thing. And so as mental health professionals, really what we need most is for you to be there and to speak up. Because I know for just a long time, there just hasn't been talk about mental health. The last time I preached at church, I specifically talked about anxiety from the stage, from fear. And I said, and if you struggle with this, let me know. We'll get coffee. And I had so many people want to meet with me and just be like, no one's ever said that before. And it breaks my heart. Breaks my heart. So if you are a mental health professional, even if you're just a regular person, what you can do is talk about it. And if someone says something hurtful or harmful to you, try not to take it personally, because you have to understand they still don't know about this stuff. Even though it may be really personal and really, you may really connect to it, maybe someone else has never dealt with that before and they don't know that their words are hurtful. So instead of being upset, I know it's really easy to get upset because people are the worst, right? But they're also the best. And so I would say just keep trying and don't be afraid to talk about it. And the more we talk about it, the more people feel okay about it. And the more people like me, when I was a teenager, will hear things and then be able to put a name on what they were experiencing. And then start the process of recovery, start the process of healing and of moving forward instead of feeling stuck. So I apologize if I got a little ranty, but I really feel strongly about this because nothing grinds my gears more than someone being rude about mental health. Next question. Julie asked, what am I reading right now and what is my favorite book? You guys, this is such a hard question. So I don't have a favorite book. I have favorite books, multiple. Les Mis by Victor Hugo, one of my all-time favorites. I've read it multiple times, although it's been a while. I will say another one of my all-time favorite book series is All Creatures Great and Small by James Herriot. He was, this was a long time ago, he was a veterinarian in the UK, and it's all about his stories. These are beautiful stories. It will just make you happy to read these. There's 4 of them. So the books are called, let's see, I think I'm going to mix it up because they don't have a list of them. I think it's All Things Bright and Beautiful, All Creatures Great and Small, All Things Wise and Wonderful, The Lord God Made Them All. So there's 4 books, each with one of those titles. And if you have kids, even if you don't have kids, you still need to read these because they will make you so happy. But if you have kids especially, read these to your kids. They are such beautiful stories about animals, and it's amazing, and I love these books so much. And if I'm really having a bad day, I'll just come read one of their chapters, and it's the best. Other favorite books. I can tell you as a child what my favorite books were. A Little Princess by Frances Hodges Burnett, I think is the author. Oh my gosh, love that book so much. The Anne of Green Gables books, so much. I love that book. Another favorite, and I cannot remember the author of this book, and I couldn't find it anywhere. I know I have it somewhere, but I have a lot of books, and they're kind of scattered all over the place. Was called Carry On, Mr. Bowditch. Carry On, Mr. Bowditch, which was about a really, really smart person who invented new ways of navigation on the seas and stuff. And I read that book multiple times. Love that book. Of course, I love the Harry Potter books. I love the Lord of the Rings books. Those are amazing. I really love any kind of fantasy. Fiction is my favorite thing. I will read other stuff, and right now I'm not currently reading any fiction. I have to pace myself because if I get involved in a fiction book, I will do nothing else until that book is completed, which is a problem. So I'm not currently reading any fiction, but I love it, especially fantasy type fiction. Oh my gosh, it makes me so happy. So where was I going with that? Oh yeah, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, love those, love them. Yeah, that's probably my favorites. What am I reading right now? There are 2 books. One of which I'm reading because I want to, and one of which I'm reading for a reason. This one is called Holy Humanitarians, American Evangelicals and Global Aid. It is written by Heather Curtis. This is a recently published book. I am reading it, I'm about 100 pages in, because I am writing an academic review of this book for NUMA, which is a the academic journal of the Society of Pentecostal Studies, of which I am a member. It's like a long process, but basically I'm writing a book critique for the journal publication. So I must read this, and it's due at the end of September, and I'm only 100 pages in, so I need to get on this. That won't be a problem. I just need to set aside some time. The other book I am reading, which I'm not very far into, but I really, really need to be, is called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. And I wanted to spend a couple of minutes talking about this book because it is blowing my mind. So I found out about this book because I listened to an episode of the Joe Rogan podcast where he had Matthew Walker on his channel. So I pretty much don't ever listen to Joe Rogan. It's just not my cup of tea, which I totally understand. He has a massive audience. He has really, really great podcast episodes, but like there's a lot of language, which doesn't normally bother me, but sometimes I'm just like, do we have to? And he's kind of a bro, which is totally fine. It's just not what I personally listen to very often. I generally listen to like knitting and crochet podcasts, obviously. So, but anyways, I came home and my husband was like, there's an episode of this podcast, totally blew my mind. We have to listen to it. So the next time we were in the car together, we listened to this podcast episode, and it's all about why we sleep. And I am telling you, it blew my mind because I have always felt like I need so much sleep. And not by so much, I don't mean like 10, 12 hours. I mean like 8. Like I need 8 hours of sleep. Otherwise, it's a bad day. It's a bad day. I am exhausted, I'm cranky, I'm hungry, it's just a mess. And I'm always like wishing those people that are like, I only got 4 hours of sleep and I'm super great. I always wanted to be one of those people. So he goes into sleeping and why we sleep and how much sleep we need. And basically, you need to sleep 7 to 9 hours. Almost every single human on the planet needs to sleep 7 to 9 hours. And there is like a certain gene of people that have a certain gene who can survive on 4 hours of sleep or less. However, the percentage of those people expressed as a round number in the world's global 7 billion people population is 0. Less than 0% of all people everywhere have this gene mutation that allows them to survive on that little sleep. So everyone else is just not sleeping enough. He calls wakefulness low-level brain damage, which is crazy because the more you stay awake, the less your brain works. You have this chemical that builds up in your brain and builds up and builds up and builds up, and sleep is the only way to get rid of it. If you stay awake too long, you will start taking micro naps, which is where your brain literally, your eyes might be open, but your brain shuts off. Shuts up. This is why driving while drowsy is actually worse for you than driving while drunk. And please no one say that I said you can drive while drunk. Please don't. Do not drink and drive. Driving while drowsy is worse. Driving when you're tired. And the Mythbusters, love the Mythbusters. They totally did a whole episode on this, and the person who had a lot of alcohol on their close course did better than the person who had stayed awake for 24 hours. So the only way to rebuild your brain and rebuild yourself is by going to sleep. That's not all that I learned. What else? There's so much. So caffeine, we definitely know that caffeine disrupts your sleep, right? So even if you're like, caffeine doesn't affect me, I can have a cup of coffee before going to bed and it's the only way I can go to sleep. No, caffeine definitely affects you. And what it does, it doesn't actually make you more awake. So there's a chemical in your brain building up the longer you are awake that lets you know that you're tired. And so you feel it. And then when you drink caffeine, it actually blocks that chemical from getting to the right part of your brain. So the caffeine basically intercepts it and just dams it up. It puts a blockade onto this chemical until the caffeine wears off. And so when you have a crash at the end and you're so exhausted, it's not because all of a sudden you're so much more tired. It's because for the last 5 hours that you've had caffeine in your system, blocking this chemical, the chemical is still building up. It's still going, oh, you've been awake. You've been awake for 12 hours. You've been awake for 13 hours. You've been awake for 14 hours. And the minute the caffeine wears off, you get a flood of this chemical in your brain. And that's why you're so tired. Because you actually are that tired, not because the caffeine has worn off. It's just been preventing your brain from recognizing it. One thing that was crazy to me is people that brag, like that have boasted about how little sleep they need. The World Health Organization classifies lack of sleep as a known carcinogen and as a cause of Alzheimer's disease. So, and he gave two examples in his podcast, which were Theresa May, who is the Prime Minister of the UK, and then Ronald Reagan, who both were like bragging basically. They would just never sleep. They slept like 4 hours a night, something like that. They could never sleep, and they both ended up with dementia and Alzheimer's. And the less you sleep, the more likely it is that you are going to contract cancer, because your body can't fight it off. So all of the healing, etc., happens when you're sleeping, and you're actually damaging your brain by not sleeping enough. Now, I am not saying this to like condemn anyone, like, oh, you don't sleep enough. Well, yeah, you all probably have kids, but people who just stay awake forever. Basically, in the book, he says if you get 6 hours or less a night, you are causing damage to your brain. Your brain needs it. And if our brain didn't need it, we would have stopped sleeping. Like, out of all the thousands of years that humanity has been in existence, if we could have evolved out of this, we would have. And we haven't. So that was really, really crazy to me. And hopefully this isn't too personal, but I know that my grandmother never slept. Like, she would get maybe 4 hours a night. She was always up super late. She got up super early, and she had very severe dementia at the end. And I am not saying that it was a direct result, but wakefulness is brain damage. And if your body cannot repair it when you're sleeping, then basically in the podcast at one point he said, all of the people who say I'll sleep when I'm dead, okay, but you'll be dead sooner. And I was just like, what? What is happening? This is insane. So also one other thing that blew my mind, and I was like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense. When you are overtired and you haven't slept enough, y'all all know we reach for junk food, right? Like, when we're tired, no one's like, you know what I would really love? A bowl of broccoli, because I've been awake for 20 hours and I would just love some broccoli. And if you could throw in some brown rice on the side, that would be perfect. Nobody says that. Everyone's like, I want McDonald's, I want Chick-fil-A, I want French fries, I want chocolate, I want everything. Well, there is a scientific reason for that. When the longer you're awake, like if you haven't slept enough, the logical part of your brain basically shuts off. So you have a logical part and you have an emotional part of your brain. Don't ask me what they're called. I couldn't tell you. It's in the book. You have to read the book. And when the logical part of your brain is the one that goes, okay, you're sad. That doesn't mean you need a donut. You're fine. You can handle this. Or you're tired. That's okay. We'll have something, but you don't need to go and eat 5 cheeseburgers. You're fine. It's fine. When you're overtired, that part of your brain actually shuts off. So there is no voice of reason still in your head going, you maybe shouldn't slam an entire package of Oreos. And I'm, again, not condemning anyone. I do this. Okay, when I'm tired, I'm like, do you know what I would really love? About 17 gallons of popcorn, and also a grilled cheese, and also, can we go to Chick-fil-A right now? And also, can we stop and get at Publix and get some ice cream on the way home? Okay, that's my life. I mean, most of the time, but especially when I'm tired. We don't have the ability to say no because the part of our brain that says no goes to sleep. Your brain can only handle so much. And There is a chemical, hormone, whatever, in your brain that when you are tired, it ramps up. So when you are rested, you can eat until you're full and you'll be satisfied. When you are tired, the hunger mechanism in your brain doesn't shut off. So it's always there going, you're hungry, you need more energy because you have stayed awake. So all you need to do is take a nap and then you won't be as hungry. I can look back in my life and just be like, wow, this explains so much. So I have been really trying, I would say, since I listened to the podcast. So I went out and bought the book immediately, but I have only gotten through the first chapter of it. And I'm going to be doing some traveling in a little bit, and I'm going to take this book with me because I really want to read it. It goes way more in depth than the podcast. And you can totally listen to the podcast, just be aware that there's some language because it is the Joe Rogan podcast. So you can just Google Joe Rogan podcast Matthew Walker, PhD, and it should pop up. If that type of language doesn't bother you, it will blow your mind, that podcast. So otherwise, buy the book because there's no language in the book. And I have been really making an effort to have a sleep time. So I try to be in bed by 10 and get up at 6:30 every day. Now, some days it's a little bit later than that, and maybe I'll sleep in a little bit later. My schedule kind of varies. Like, usually I work early, like 7:30 or 8 to 3:30 or 4, but then like Sundays are always crazy. I have to get up super early, and then on Wednesdays I work until like 9. So it's my schedule's kind of messed up, but I'm trying to have a sleep schedule. Like, this is the time that I sleep. And my brain like knows about it now. Like, oh, it's time to go to bed. It took a little while. Now, I always love sleep, so I haven't really had a ton of issues going to sleep at a certain time, but he has all kind of tips of like if you have problems sleeping, etc. And it has really helped primarily with A, how much junk food I'm eating, and B, my emotional health. The less you sleep, the more emotional you are, of course, because the logical part of your brain shuts off. And I would say sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is just go to sleep. If you're depressed, if you're feeling anxious, go to sleep. Like, if you haven't gotten enough sleep, you need to sleep. Now, you can go too far with this and sleep too much. We don't need to sleep 12, 15 hours a day unless you have some kind of medical condition, etc. We don't need that much sleep. We're built to sleep a certain amount. So, I don't know. I feel like that was a really long answer to this question, but that is what I am currently reading, and that book is blowing my mind. So, I look forward to getting further into it. Let's see. Amy asked quite a while ago, what do I do in real life for my job that I get to travel so much to California and Texas and have so much time to crochet? So that's a two-part question. At the time she asked that question, I had just switched jobs. So I used to be a trainer for an auto insurance company, and I would travel to California, I would travel to Texas, and I would travel to New Jersey. Those were the main offices, and I would train new employees on how to handle auto insurance claims. Super fun. Not. Especially because they made me travel for like a month at a time and they wouldn't send me home. But now I don't do as much traveling because I don't have to. I work at a church in Tampa as a pastor, so I kind of already covered that. That is why I used to travel so much. As far as how do I have so much time to crochet, I suppose I have a little more time because I don't have any kids currently. So I don't have any children, so I can just do whatever I want with my time. But the second part of that answer is I always have yarn with me, even if I am 1,000% sure that I will not be able to pick up my yarn that day. Like, for example, I always take a project with me on Sunday mornings to church. I'm there from like 7:30 a.m. until like 1:30 when everybody leaves. Do I ever pull that project out? No, not a chance. I'm so busy on Sunday mornings, but I have it. Because you never know. You never know when you're going to need yarn. I always have yarn with me. And if I don't, it's a bad day. So I always have a project with me. And pretty much if I'm sitting, I'm crocheting or knitting. So I'll be sitting watching TV. I'll be sitting on the couch. I have yarn. Sometimes I will actually crochet while I'm cooking dinner. I know this sounds crazy, but If something's like in the oven, I'm gonna go pick up my project and do a row or two. I always try to have some kind of simple project on the go so that I can do that and I don't have to be focusing on a really complicated pattern. There are certain projects that only stay at home, and I crochet all the time. It's not like I have so much time, although like I said, maybe I have more time than some of you because I don't have kids, but I mean, I feel like I'm really busy in my life. Like, I have a full-time job and I teach classes, so that's like a part-time job. And then I have a family, and I've been trying to work out and exercise and eat more healthfully, so I have to cook food. I will say I don't love cleaning, so I put that off. I would much rather crochet than clean. It's my life goal, you guys, not to be rich, but just to make enough money to pay someone to clean my house. That's all I want in life, is just to pay someone to clean my house, because I love a clean space. It really helps me with my mental health, but I hate cleaning so much. So yeah, that's pretty much my day. As I get up, I go to work, I'll crochet on my lunch break, if I take a lunch break. Sometimes when I have meetings and things, I will knit or crochet, but it depends on the meeting, because I don't want ever anyone to feel like I'm not paying attention to them. But if it's like a big group meeting where I'm just kind of absorbing information, that actually helps me concentrate more. And then I go to the gym on the way home, and I usually don't crochet or knit at the gym, but sometimes I do. If I get there extra early or something, I usually spend the time stretching because I really like need it. Otherwise I get like hip pain and knee pain and etc. But yeah, so I do that, and then when I get home, I eat dinner and take a shower, crochet until bed, unless we're doing something else. Next question is from Liz, and she said, my question is about the skirts you crocheted. Have you worn them, and if so, how did they hold up? You're not gonna like this answer. One of them I didn't wear and I donated. I decided it was too big. The other one, the bamboo one that you specifically mentioned in your question, Liz, I wore it a few times and it's fine. I definitely needed to wear like a slip underneath or leggings, because eventually the stitches will separate. It fit really well. It's just that it stretches out a little bit, so what I need to do, because I ran out of yarn, I used every single last drop of that yarn to make that skirt, and so I didn't have enough for ties, is I need to get some an elastic band or some elastic thread, something like that, to sew on the inside of it so that it will stay up on my waist. So I didn't have a problem with it with something showing through the stitches. I had a problem with it just kind of getting heavy and falling down over time. And I haven't done that, so I've only worn it like twice. But I loved it both times I wore it. So maybe I'll get some elastic and fix it. Couple more questions. One is from Killy, who says, I noticed that you seem very sensitive to yarn compositions and textures. I feel like I'm the same way, and I'm worried I will miss out on a lot of the perks of crochet, since there are a lot of yarns I just can't use. Have you been able to find plenty of nice yarns to use for wearables? Which yarn types do you find most or least troublesome, like merino versus cotton, etc.? And then she has a few more statements. So yes, I have very sensitive skin. I have always had very sensitive skin. Basically, my body doesn't like most things. It's not just my skin that's sensitive. I'm emotionally sensitive. My stomach is sensitive. My back is sensitive. Like, there's just so many problems. Like, just give me any scenario and my body's gonna be like, no, we have a problem with that. Even if I super want to do it, my body's gonna be like, hold on, I need to consult. So yes, this is totally a thing. I'm very sensitive to textures. If something is scratchy, I can't deal with it. I have found most acrylic is fine for me. Some I haven't really used the super scratchy acrylic. I like super soft things. So I don't, cotton is good. Soft acrylic is good. Bamboo seems to be really good, although I've only made a couple of projects out of that. As far as natural fibers go, like from an animal, merino wool seems to be okay with me, and that's it. Alpaca, you would think that it would be super because it's so soft. It makes me so itchy, and I made an alpaca shawl and I almost never wear it because every time I put it on my neck it prickles and I hate it. I have not tried any non-superwash wool. I am going to give it a try in the future, but I have my doubts as to whether I'll be able to keep it. I did try a project one time that had acrylic and mohair, and it made me pretty itchy. So I love merino and I would really like to use other types of wool, and maybe I could, just not on my neck, because this is the most sensitive part to me, and my head. So like a hat or something, I have like my sock head hat that I made. It's perfect. It doesn't bother me at all. That merino is fantastic. But if it's a scratchy wool with more texture or more hardiness, it's probably gonna bother me. So not that I won't use it. It doesn't seem to bother my hands when I'm making it. So that's a bonus. But I would say if you want to use those types of fibers, totally do it. Just be mindful of what you're making. So I can wear stuff on my feet, like a much harsher wool than I could on my neck. So make socks. I could probably wear mittens and it's not going to make me itchy. I'm just not going to wear it on my neck. I'm maybe not going to make a t-shirt out of that yarn. Maybe I'll make a cardigan or something that's not going to be like right up here. It'll be like drapey or something like that. So to think about the project that you are making with the yarn, or just make it for someone else, like you said. And I mean, acrylic has come so far. So, I mean, I know is it polyester yarn that I saw the other day? Like microfiber yarn. There's so many options now. That you don't have to feel sad if you're not using wool, but if you're sensitive, I would try merino. One other tip, especially if you live in a southern warm climate, if you try to wear wool and you instantly get prickly, it's probably because it's too hot to wear wool. So wool is made to keep you warm. The reason you see everyone in like Iceland and Finland and Norway, they wear all these crazy like super hardy wools. It's because it's freezing. And the warmer it is, the more prickly you are going to be made by wool. So if you're wearing a wool sweater that seems prickly to you in 60-degree weather, go out in like freezing weather and see if it prickles you, because it probably won't. So you may just be in too warm of a climate to wear that. Okay, let's see here. I think I have 2 more questions. One is, this is a question from Ravelry, from Ambi Crafts Reads. She asked if I had heard of Booktubeathon. I haven't. I don't know what that is. And I haven't looked it up. I don't know what that is. So if you know what Booktubeathon is and you want to comment down below and tell me, that would be fabulous. And then the final question is from Busy Nana, who has been a long viewer of this podcast. And she asked, how did I come up with a name for this podcast? So that actually is a really easy question. I just liked how it sounded. So I knew that I wanted it to have not necessarily rhyme, but kind of go together. So the Cozy Cottage Crochet. I was originally just going to do Cozy Cottage Crochet, but that name was taken in a couple of the platforms. And what I did when I started this podcast is I went and reserved that name across all platforms. So Instagram, Facebook, Etsy. I reserved a WordPress blog, even though I don't blog. YouTube, I reserved the name across the board. And I could have just gone with the Cozy Cottage like I am on Ravelry. Although Ravelry, I wanted to be the Cozy Cottage Crochet, but it was too many characters. It wouldn't let me use all of my letters. So I had to do just the Cozy Cottage. But I wanted crochet in the title because that is primarily what this podcast is about. So I definitely wanted people, even if they saw anything, like if they saw my Instagram handle, if they saw my Facebook handle, if they saw me on YouTube, that my name is the Cozy Cottage Crochet. Like I want it to be known that crochet is what this is about. And also I live in like a cute little house in St. Pete. It's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, but the bedrooms are a little small. So most of our space is in the living room. And it's just like my cozy little place, and it's what I've always wanted, is a house. And we bought a house, and it's kind of amazing, except when your air conditioner breaks. I'm not bitter. So yeah, I just kind of had it in the back of my mind because I thought about starting this podcast for quite some time before I actually did. So yeah, I kind of just thought about that podcast already. Thought about the podcast. I did think about the podcast, but I had the name in mind. It just came to me one day, and that's what I decided to do. I thought about it for months before I finally went and reserved all of those names. So that is how the Cozy Cottage Crochet came into being. So those are all the questions. If you have a question that you would like me to answer on a future Q&A episode, please don't leave a comment down below and tell me your question. I'm happy to answer it. It may be several months before, I would say probably after Christmas, before I record another Q&A video. Maybe not. Maybe I'll have time. But I love doing these. I think it's super fun, and it gives you a chance to kind of get to know me other than just what I make. And I'm a pretty open book, so if I think something's too personal, then I won't answer it, but pretty much nothing's too personal. So there is one other Q&A video on my channel. If you are new around here and you want to check that out, it's like months ago. You'd have to go back. It's called the Cozy Corner Q&A, I believe is what I titled that video. So I hope that any tips on blocking acrylic were helpful to you. If you have further questions, leave them down below. If you like this video, do give it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to be kept up to date on any new videos, do hit the subscribe button down below. And I will be home tonight from my travels, and then I will see you in the next episode, which hopefully will only be 1 week from today. That is my plan. So until I see you again, happy crafting, and I hope you have the most fabulous time.